భారతదేశంలో డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ దేశంలోనే మొట్టమొదటి సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం. దాదాపు 2.5 దశాబ్దాలుగా దూర విద్యా విధానం ద్వారా కంప్యూటర్ కోర్సును అనుసంధానం చేస్తూ BA, BCom, BSc డిగ్రీ కోర్సులను అందిస్తోంది. పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేషన్ స్థాయి, డిగ్రీ, డిప్లొమా స్థాయి కోర్సులను ఔత్సాహికులైన విద్యార్థులకు అందిస్తోంది. డెవలప్మెంట్ స్టడీస్లో సెంటర్ ఫర్ ఎకనామిక్స్ అండ్ సోషల్ స్టడీస్ ద్వారా ఎంఫిల్, PhDతో పాటు విశ్వవిద్యాలయమే స్వయంగా దూర విద్యా విధాన అంశంపైన PhD వంటి పరిశోధనా కోర్సులు ప్రవేశపెట్టింది. రాష్ట్ర వ్యాప్తంగా సుమారు 4.5 లక్షల మంది విద్యార్థులు ఈ విశ్వవిద్యాలయం నుంచి ఉన్నత విద్యావకాశాలు పొందుతున్నారు. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం స్థానికంగా స్వయం బోధనా పద్ధతిలో ముద్రణ రూపంలో రూపొందించిన కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అందిస్తోంది. కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అధ్యయనానికి సహకరించే విధంగా రేడియో, టెలివిజన్ పాఠ్యాంశాల ఆధారంగా కార్యక్రమాలు ప్రసారం చేస్తోంది. అధ్యయన కేంద్రాల ద్వారా ఏర్పాటు చేసే సలహా సంసర్గ తరగతులు, సైన్స్ ప్రాక్టికల్ సౌకర్యాలు విద్యార్థులకు స్వయం అధ్యయనానికి ఒక చక్కటి అవకాశం. ఇవి విద్యార్థి సమీపంలో ఉండే అధ్యయన కేంద్రం నుంచే పొందొచ్చు.
Hello viewers, welcome to this teleconference brought to you live from the Doordarshan studios by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Today we shall be discussing body language and silent language. This topic is covered in course 7 of the MA English program. Course 7 is titled Aspects of Language and Their Relation to Literature. In this course, body language is unit 20 and silent language is unit 21. As you know, body language is a very important element of communication or expression, both in day-to-day life as well as in literature. You must have seen this in many films and in literature, in plays, in novels. You must have also seen that there are stage directions which tell us about the way in which a character has to act or behave. There are stage directions which tell us how the character has to enter the stage. There are such elements which guide us about the body language. To discuss this topic today, I have with me in the studios Professor G. Rajagopal. Dr. Rajagopal is professor in the Department of ESL Studies and Dean School of English Language Education, the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He has his BA Education and MA English from Mysore University, his PGDT, MPhil and PhD from CIEFL, and his Advanced Diploma in Applied Linguistics from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, United Kingdom. He started teaching at MES College of Arts and Science and Commerce, Bangalore in 1972. With a long and illustrious career as a teacher and a teacher educator, he has not only taught at the Regional Institute of English, Chandigarh, but also apart from EFLU, he has taught at Sultan Qaboos University, Muscat, Oman, and he has been a visiting professor at Sanaa University, Yemen. He is interested in teacher training and is a researcher in the field of ELT, English language teaching, and a specialist in bilingualism and multilingualism, classroom ELT techniques, the role of L1 mother tongue in the teaching of English, and the helping of teachers of English, especially those with a dominant L1 background. Thank you, Professor Rajagopal, for being here with us today and for participating in this conference. I also have with me in the studios Dr. Joy Anuradha. Dr. Joy Anuradha is currently an assistant professor in the languages group at the Birla Institute of Technology and Science, Pilani, Hyderabad campus. She teaches communication skills to engineers, to would-be engineers, through courses like technical communication, effective public speaking, technical report writing, etc. She has her MA in English from Osmania University and has her PG diploma in the teaching of English, MLit and PhD from CIEFL. Welcome Joy to this program. She has worked also at the Aurora group of colleges, institutions for more than 10 years. I am happy to have Joy here with us to participate in this program on body language and silent language. You know very well that we structure this program in such a way that you listen to the two experts, the resource persons who are with us in the studios, and you can interact with them by calling in. You can use the phone in facility, you can call us at the following numbers, and you can interact with the experts by asking questions, giving your comments and observations. You can note down the telephone numbers. The numbers are 040 2703 1431, 2703 1432, 2703 1433. Please remember that when you are asking your question, you need to turn down the volume of your television sets so that your call comes through easily to us and we can hear what you are saying. Also remember to identify yourself clearly and to ask your question in as short a possible way. Let me now begin the discussion. Let me begin by asking Dr. Rajgopal to tell us about body language. What is body language and what can we tell our viewers about body language in general?
Thank you, Professor Pushpa Ramakrishna. Friends, as you know, body language is language which is demonstrated to everyone else through the use of one's body and its parts. Now we have a mind, and the mind does a lot of thinking. The mind tells the body many things, and the body also shows the viewer or the observer sometimes how exactly one's mind is working. Now the body and its parts, say for example your head, your eyes, maybe your cheeks, your mouth, your shoulders, and the rest of the body, the way you use your hands and fingers and so on, the way you stand, the posture, all these things take a very important role in conveying any message. Now this is very important for us to understand, that the body conveys something that the mind is thinking of. You may not know what exactly the mind is thinking of because the person may not be speaking, but by looking at the individual and observing somebody's body very carefully, you can understand quite a few things. We will now gradually try and understand what are those things that we can understand when we look at the body. How do we understand this? You can observe lots of animals, for example. You will know that, for example, an animal like a dog is very angry. You know that a lion or a tiger or an elephant is ready to attack you. You know that a cat doesn't like what you're doing. You know many of these things. In a similar manner, we have our body which also shows a number of feelings, thinking, attitude, what exactly we want the other person to understand from us, and so on and so forth. So the body is a very precious thing. For example, let's start looking at something like our gestures or maybe our facial expressions. Let's see, Joy has a few things to talk about gestures and expressions now. Yes.
Well, after listening to Professor Rajgopal, I think no one doubts that our body speaks. we communicate much more through our body than our own words through which we express ourselves. So it's important for us to understand how our body, what kind of interpretations we can make from the body language that another person expresses when we speak to them, and how do we respond through our body language. So it's important that we must know that there are times in our lives when we think, do I know what's on his mind or what's on her mind? And there are also times when we wonder, is he saying the truth? So these are times when we can really be helped if we know how to interpret another person's body gestures, the facial expressions. There are different things about a person. For instance, it's always said that in the first 7 minutes that you get to meet or listen to a person, you make almost 11 major decisions about the person. So our dress, our appearance itself, the clothes you wear, your hairstyle, the accessories that you carry, maybe your pen or your bag, or if you're going for an interview, the file in which you carry your certificates, all those things talk about yourself. So apart from the dress and appearance, you also speak through the posture. Maybe you're erect or you're slumped, your shoulders are slouching, and that shows whether you are alert, enthusiastic about something, or you're bored and tired about something. So the way you lean forward when you listen to somebody's comments, or when you're listening to an interviewer talking to you, can tell the other person whether you're interested or not. Apart from your posture, even your gestures, the movement gestures, I mean the movement we make with our hands, with our arms, even our shoulders, the way they move, whether you're blobbing them or you can express some gestures. Your head nods and other things, and there is lots of different cultures, the way they nod their heads, whether they're saying yes or no is sometimes difficult to understand. But I think we Indians have a common culture. We need to discuss that a little later. So all these gestures are hand movements, whether we are indicating something through our hands as we speak, whether the pen that you hold in your hands is shaking as you speak, all these can tell so much about a person. There are a few other things that we can talk about as we move on in the program, about gestures, postures, and of course facial expressions. Some of them are universal. Everyone can, I'm sure, recognize if a person is happy or sad, whether a person is afraid of something. We are all sure what the expressions are. But there are a few other expressions that might differ. A raised eyebrow can have a different meaning for different people. So these are things that we'll look at a little later in the program.
Yeah, Dr. Rajagopal, can you tell us more about head movements and about, about eye contact and facial expressions?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, many a times when you ask somebody and the person says this, now is it a yes or is it a no? And in some cultures, this is a yes. And in some cultures, this is also a yes. No, you just raise your eyebrows like that, and that means a yes. But in many places in India, for example, you find people saying something like this. Now, it's very common. Now, how does someone who doesn't know what this means understand you? Does it mean that you agree or you disagree, or what exactly are you trying to say? We don't know. The other thing, for example, is the way we use our hands. We are very fond of using our hands. We push it up there and we push it up there, and then our face also goes up, and we use lots of hand movements. The other people who use such hand movements are usually Italians, for example. They use lots and lots of hand movements. Whereas, if you go to certain countries, they don't use hands so much at all. In fact, everything goes on right here itself. So it's all here and that's it. Now we don't know some of these things, and sometimes when we use a lot of our hands and so on, many of my students, for example, when I was teaching in Oman, for example, one day suddenly the student came up to me and said, Dr. Raju, oh, why do you shake your head so much? I didn't realize that I was shaking my head so much. Then from next day onwards, I put it a little stiff and I said, okay, I won't shake my head much at all. But you see, these students had observed that. So in other words, many of these things we do very unconsciously. It's a part of our culture, the way we have been brought up. But if you observe, there are many families, many people who make sure that they don't shake their head much at all. But that's also not very good. Now you hold a stiff, all the time, talk like this straight away. And one of my teachers always used to say, why do you stand like an electric pole? Move a little bit and so on. Shake your body a little bit. So that is the other extreme. Which means that take excellent examples from our own Telugu cinema. Look at somebody like Brahmanandam. Like his name, he is a Brahmanandam. There is no end to the kind of gestures he uses, the facial expressions he makes, whatever it is, this, that, and so on. Rajendra Prasad, for example, my God, what an actor he is. I am very fond of somebody like S.V. Rangarao Garu, and in Maya Bazaar. What a nice. Or, I don't know if you youngsters are familiar with this, you should go and watch a film called Nartana Shala, where NTR becomes Sairandri, and there is a fantastic dance. He dances in that, an amazing kind of thing. So, whether it's Akinini Nageshwar Rao or any of these people, don't look at the present day boys and girls, they are not very expressive. The good old fellows who are full of expressions. So what we are trying to say is that body language is something we must pay attention to. As Joy was telling you some time ago, particularly when we want to attend interviews, or particularly we want to make an impression. We are making a presentation. Look, the whole point is that we have our expressions, we have our eyes, we have our hands, shoulders, head. It's quite important that we make use of all these body parts usefully when we make a presentation or take part in an interview or communicating, whatever it is. A careful study of one's use of body parts and body language is what is known as kinesics. It's there in your lesson and you must pay attention to that particular part there. Now it's a very scientific study. We can study the kinesics, the way somebody uses one's body parts very carefully. And it is a matter of study. Every little movement, whether it's a finger, hand, whatever it is what we define as a kine, K-I-N-E. So take care to make sure that you observe all these body actions simply because the body parts and the body actions convey a certain mood, convey a certain impression. That's very important.
So, Dr. Rajagopal, you've spoken then about how important it is to be conscious of what our body is conveying. Actually, when we talk about body language becomes a part of us, in the sense that it becomes a part of an individual's personality. And very often, as Joy had said a short while ago, we convey what we may not even want to convey. Sometimes it's so unconscious that we convey what we do not want to convey. For instance, I may pretend to be very confident and very sure of myself, but when I go to a particular place, or if I'm somewhere where I'm conveying through my body, I'm conveying or sending a different message across, the other person gets an impression about my state of mind much more clearly through my body than through what I'm actually saying. So you have said that we need to pay attention to it, and that there are great artists both in film and in theatre who have done so, who have shown through their movements of the face, of the eyebrows, of the eyes, through the neck, shoulders and so on. They have shown that they can convey a number of messages.
And
Much
one of,
more
one of
sometimes.
those things, very important things, is related to eye contact.
Yes.
Maintaining eye contact or establishing eye contact.
But different cultures
Yes,
view
of
eye
course.
contact differently, don't they?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about eye
Yeah,
contact?
see, for example, when you look at something like eye contact, now we say that generally maintaining eye contact is very important. But mind you, there are also certain communities where you are not supposed to look eye to eye. Nevertheless, it's very important that when you are making a certain point to a certain individual, in an interview for example, it's very important that you do maintain proper eye contact. Not that you stare into somebody's eyes, no, not that, but certainly a very gentle eye contact, because eye contact establishes a close relationship between the speaker and the hearer. And therefore, in any communication situation, an eye contact becomes very much necessary. Like for example, if I'm talking now and I'm looking up there all the time and so on, body language is very important, eye contact is and I'm looking up there. What message are you getting? You're not getting any message at all. You want to add anything about eye contact and so on?
Yes, another thing about eye contact is when you maintain eye contact with the person who's speaking to you, you also get to notice the body language of that person, and therefore you can respond to that person better. You can communicate better, you can phrase your questions and whatever you want to say to that person better, and therefore maybe your communication can be much more effective.
Can you talk, Joy, about personal space also, about the personal space of an individual and how that is communicates something about the individual's state of mind or their person's personality? Can you talk about that also?
Yeah, the study of physical space is called proxemics, and Edward T. Hall has done a lot of research on this, and he says that every individual has his or her own personal territory or space, or you call it a bubble around you. And this personal space might differ from place to place. There are cultures where people are used to being close together. So they do not feel that it's an invasion on their privacy when someone stands or comes closer to them. But there are also cultures which are very restricted or orthodox, I would say, and there they want more space, for instance. So if you compare an Indian with an Englishman, probably the Englishman would require or has a larger personal bubble than an Indian would have.
Yeah.
And then there are again different spaces, like if there's a director's office, it's always huge and it conveys some meaning. The larger space depicts that you stand a little away from the person, and therefore the power of the person is also shown through space, through the use of space. And I would say the bigger cars, when compared to the smaller cars or the scooters, bikes, etc., are also conveying meanings of space. Similarly, we have intimate distances where people are very close, usually with our children or spouses or very close family members. We maintain an intimate distance that is probably just 1 feet or 1.5 feet. And then there is a personal distance which we use with our colleagues and friends that can be somewhere between 1 to 4 feet. And then we have a social distance that makes you much more distance from the other person. So as we get to know the people better, we move from this social distance. Of course, I'm not talking about public distance of public speakers or a minister coming to address a gathering, that they do not know the audience at all. But usually we try to make a movement from a social distance to a personal distance, and there are of course times when you get intimate also with people. So this distance tells us so much about how people look at you, and people do not want their space to be intruded. So sometimes in lifts you find people standing very stiff.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, if you watch, say 3 or 4 people, the way they crowd round, or sometimes, you know, you have a kind of a closed situation. 3 people don't want anyone else to come closer, so they form a small
Huddle
little group.
together almost.
Almost huddled together. And we also talk of situations where you sort of open out. You stand in such a way that there is room for a 5th person to come in, a 4th person to come in. If you leave that kind of a space, if I want to join them, they give you a signal that yes, you can join. But the moment you find that there are those 3 people who are very close together, 4 people who are huddled together, and they are talking very closely, you know that that is a closed kind of situation. You have no admission there at all. And so you better stay out kind of thing. But these are small things. The point is that we must tell every one of you that watch out for body language very carefully. There's a lot you can learn from body language.
I think we keep doing it all the time,
Yeah.
but I have here some examples of body language and the interpretation of body language. I think our viewers would like to watch this, see this, and perhaps you can explain, Joy, what exactly they mean. We have some examples of body language and their interpretation.
Yeah, the ones that you can see here are the brisk and erect walk. For example, when a person is entering an interview room, maybe that shows that's a sign of confidence. When I actually think of this confidence, I'm always reminded of Sound of Music. And Julie Andrews is going to meet the children, and then you see that she sings, "I have confidence in me." That's the song she sings, and all her gestures show that she lacks confidence. And I think that's the way the director is trying to show us the contrast between what she wants and maybe what she's
her body
yet to-
conveys.
Yes.
Yeah, you can go through that fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So
Just
sitting
tell them
upright,
yeah.
when you sit upright, again it shows confidence, and if you're sitting upright in a lecture hall or whatever, shows that you're attentive. Standing with hands on hips is usually supposed to be a gesture of aggressiveness. Then hands on the cheek is again someone listening carefully with interest, and sometimes maybe when someone is even thinking. The drooping shoulders or hunched back, slouching, all these are pointers to low levels of confidence. Then leaning forward when you're listening to someone shows that you're attentive to what the other person is saying. Steepling fingers is again a gesture showing dominance, determination and interest. We have a few more gestures here. A firm handshake is again a sign of confidence, whereas probably if someone is not a limp handshake could be a sign of nervousness. Hands in the pocket again show anxiety of the person, whereas open palms are always a sign of sincerity and openness. Nodding of head, already Professor Rajgopal has told us about nodding, but nodding also could mean acceptance or agreement. Biting nails or fidgeting could be a sign of nervousness. And tapping fingers, when you tap your fingers, it could be out of impatience, or it could also be a sign of boredom when you tap your fingers. Then guarding your mouth or rubbing your eyes or sometimes touching your nose can tell the other person that probably you're lying or you're trying to deceive the other person. These are some of the
These are some of the
gestures.
examples that we have here, and I'm sure there are many more, and we also need to look at them as clusters, in the sense that we cannot really isolate one. For instance, rubbing the nose, or as I was doing this, I think it means maybe it's because my nose is itching. It's not just because I'm trying to shy away from something. Perhaps you would like to say which categories they are, maybe Dr. Rajgopal, you would like to comment on them.
True. All these can be thought of as clusters of behavior. Now, clusters will mean grouping them together. Now, when it comes to confidence, there are many symbols which
Dr.
show-
Rajgopal, we'll come back to clusters
Yeah.
of body language after the short news break. We have a short news break
Okay.
for about 5 minutes, after which we'll return to this discussion about clusters of body language. Clusters of meaning or interpretation in body language. I now want Dr. Joy Anuradha to tell us about clusters of body language and their interpretation. Just
Yes.
briefly, please tell us about it.
Yeah, as you were pointing out, not one gesture or as Sir said, kinds, not one kind is enough for us to decide. Suppose somebody puts their hand on the face, it doesn't mean that they're always lying. You have to check again whether their breathing has increased or are they not maintaining eye contact with the speaker. And there are a group of cluster. Are their eye movements rapid, or is there a change in the voice or change in pitch, or are they stammering? All these things put together can tell you a little more about whether the person is deceiving you or not. So it's important, especially for confidence, the clusters that people usually look for are standing tall and erect, or even when you sitting tall and with your shoulder back posture, and solid eye contact, and especially a smile can ooze a lot of confidence. And all the gestures need to be deliberate and purposeful, not very rigid or jerky kinds of movements. Then of course slow and clear speech, and maybe a moderate to a low voice. All these put together can tell a person whether you're confident or not. These are the clusters that we try to look for.
Yeah, Dr. Rajgopal, we've spoken about body language so far. We wanted to speak about silent language also.
Oh, yeah.
So can you tell us how and why silent language is important?
Very,
And,
very important. Very important. Remember, if body language happens to be something which occurs unconsciously, silent language, whatever you do in silent language, is something which you do very deliberately. You want to do it, and therefore you do it, and you show certain things and so on. I can give you a number of examples here which you can also think of. For example, if you take writing, nobody speaks while writing, it's a silent language, but in writing it can be pictures, what we call pictographs, it can be any kind of writing, symbolic writing, you can use signs.
we have a phone coming in. Can
Oh, you
we
have a
just
phone
take,
yeah, why not?
take
Yes.
the call and then continue? Yes, please.
హలో
Yes,
నమస్కారం మేడం.
Namaskaram.
ఇప్పుడు ఈ ఎంఏ ఇంగ్లీష్ ఇక్కడ చదువుతున్న వాళ్ళు
Uh-huh.
వీటికి చెప్పేటువంటి ప్రాసెస్ కూడా ఎక్కువగా మొదట నెమ్మలో ఇంగ్లీష్ టు ఇంగ్లీష్ చెప్పడంలో కొంచెం వీక్ గా ఉంటుంది కొన్ని చోట్ల.
Uh-huh.
తర్వాత మా వాళ్ళ అమ్మాయి ఇప్పుడు మన కాలేజీలో మొదలుగా చదువుతూ ఉండగా ఎప్పుడు కొద్దిగా అర్థం కాకపోతే జస్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ అడిగింది అంటున్నాడు, క్లారిఫై చేయండి అని చెప్పి.
It's not very clear what you're saying. మీరు ఇంగ్లీష్ టు ఇంగ్లీష్ చెప్తున్నారు అని అడుగుతున్నారు.
ఎంఏ ఇంగ్లీష్
Uh-huh.
where the people are following that grammar.
Grammar?
Yes. Without
మీరు అడిగే
grammar,
ప్రశ్న నాకు అర్థమైంది.
the people are writing whatever they like.
మీకు యాక్చువల్లీ
For example,
వీఆర్ టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ బాడీ లాంగ్వేజ్. ఎస్, వీఆర్ టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ బాడీ లాంగ్వేజ్ అండ్ సైలెంట్ లాంగ్వేజ్. ఎంఏ ఇంగ్లీష్ చేస్తున్న స్టూడెంట్కి ఇంగ్లీష్ రావాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. ఆ స్టూడెంట్కి మేము ఇంగ్లీష్లోనే చెప్తున్నాము, మేము ఇంగ్లీష్ సింపుల్ ఇంగ్లీష్లో చెప్తున్నాము, క్లాసెస్లో కూడా సింపుల్ ఇంగ్లీష్ వాడి చెప్తున్నాము. ఎంఏ ఇంగ్లీష్ డిగ్రీ తీసుకునే క్యాండిడేట్కి, తీసుకోవాల్సిన క్యాండిడేట్కి, తీసుకోదలుచుకున్న క్యాండిడేట్కి ఇంగ్లీష్ నేర్చుకోవాల్సిన అవసరం కూడా ఉన్నది. సో సింపుల్ ఇంగ్లీష్లో మేము చెప్తున్నాం. ఇంగ్లీష్ టు ఇంగ్లీష్ చెప్తున్నారు అన్నది ఎక్కడైనా అట్లాగే జరుగుతుంది. వుడ్ డాక్టర్ రాజగోపాల్ వాంట్ టు స్పీక్ అబౌట్ ఇట్?
No, it is how it is. It's to be learned, because mind you, it is learning will mean you also have to put it down in your answers, and therefore what you learn you respond in the examination.
I would like to add that none of us, all three of us who are here now, do not speak English as a first language. It is not anyone's own native language in that sense. Yet we have made an effort and we have learnt. We have another phone call coming in. Yes. Please ask your question. Yes. Yes. Please identify yourself. Tell me who you are.
Madam, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rajgopal sir and Joy madam. Sir, this is Madhumati Kotamraju.
Oh, Madhumati Kotamraju. Okay.
Sir, I'm so happy seeing you sir, here on the phone and also on the television.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes,
Please ask
yes.
The question is, what is human component in body language?
The human
The human
component.
The human component in body language. But who are we talking about? Are we talking of animals? No, we are talking of the humans. But mind you, just as we know from a lot of reading and learning that humans are different from one another, in a similar manner, every human being has a unique way of expressing, using one's body. Some are very expressive, some are not very expressive also. Nevertheless, that every human being should be, number one, using one's body parts in expressing, number one. Number two, that every human being uses it.
Yeah.
This is also there. And number three, and more important for you as a student, you should know how to observe, what to observe, and what to understand from your observations.
So we are saying two things. In fact, we are saying you should learn how to convey things through your body language,
Yeah.
and you should learn to understand people,
Yes.
other people's body language, because that also is a form of communication.
Absolutely.
That's what we are saying. Yeah, we have another telephone call coming in. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
I'm Radhika here.
Yes, Radhika, tell me.
I was just watching your show. In fact, I'm a MBA HR, and I just want to know to what extent this, body language and silent language is useful for a MBA graduate who wants to settle on an HR field.
Okay, HR and MBA, maybe Joy would like to answer that question.
Yeah, Radhika. I think more than speaking about just the MBAs, I would say that it's as good as communicate. It's not that body language is something new. Just like a child learns to speak, the child also learns the body language that is quite common to the culture, and as part of culture we are taught what do we need to do, what are the gestures which are appropriate, how do we greet people when we meet them, etc. Now, for an MBA in HR, I think most of the interview firms nowadays have an HR person in their interview board just to observe a person's body language and try and understand whether this candidate is lying or not. Is he telling us the truth or is she telling us the truth? This is something, and of course in business, when you want to communicate effectively with anyone, body language is certainly important, because that substitutes, adds, complements to the words that you speak. And therefore, what I'm trying to say is you must try and take advantage of this body language, convert it into silent language, and then be deliberate in your gestures, and probably win
for
deals.
the HR person, you are saying that it is very significant, very important, because not everything is put into words, and the HR individual or the management HR individual or trainee or trainer has to consciously make an effort, because has to deal with a number of different people in different strata of the organization. So therefore, this will be extremely significant for the person in business management, in management.
We can only add that, you see, the HR person is himself or herself a model. Model to the others, and at the same time, the HR person is also training others to become good in whatever they are doing.
And analyzing others.
Absolutely.
I think that also is important, because
Absolutely.
it's interpreting and analyzing the behavior of others.
Therefore, for Radhika, it's quite important that she not only knows about body language, but she herself has good body language, so that she can talk about it
We
to
have
others.
another phone call coming in. 2 calls, I believe. Let's take them first, then continue the discussion. Yes?
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Madam, how to pronounce the gesture? It is gesture or gesture?
Gestures. It's gestures. It's not gestures, it's gestures. The word is pronounced gestures. Would you like to repeat what I have said?
It is
Gesture.
yeah.
Gesture.
It is not
Gesture.
ga. It is
Okay,
gesture.
thank you.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
go on.
Is there anything else you want to ask? No. Let's continue. Okay, we were talking about silent language, Dr. Rajagopal, and you were giving us some examples of silent language and
Yeah.
telling us how we need to make body language, which is unconscious, into a conscious silent language. Many of the things that we do under silent language are also, I think, they become culture specific, they become specific to a group of people, and therefore we understand them without having to make a conscious effort. We know that there are certain signs and symbols that become a part of our language. Can you go ahead and tell us more?
Yeah,
about
see, for example, very simple silent language, examples of silent language. For example, a smile or a laughter, or sometimes you may have a tear, for example, you may be crying or what, or you may use your hands. And mind you, we can have several gestures. And if I use one hand like that, it means one. If I use both the hands, it's another. If I use something like that and say, "Hi Hitler," that's another. Or if I do something like that, it's another. And this is another. Oh, lots of all this. This is all part of silent language. I don't have to say anything at all, but I'm conveying quite a lot of things. In a similar manner, a handshake. As Joy said some time ago, it's a firm handshake or it's a very light handshake. I was, for example, in a country where when you want to greet somebody, you had actually to touch the noses and say kind of thing. So you had to touch the nose, and this is what happens in the Arab world. In Oman, for example, what I learned was you touch the nose and say and then sort of make the noises. Now there are various such things. Apart from these things, we should also know that, for example,
But these are culture specific.
These are very culture specific.
We cannot do it out of Oman.
we
I
should not.
understand.
We should know them first
Yes.
of all. But the basic things are certainly there and so on. We can talk about theatre, we can talk about dance forms, we can talk about sculpture, mime, all these things. They're all part of silent language, something that we should know. But the silent language that we use in our everyday life is something that we must learn. And they're necessary, as Joy said some time ago, in the interviews or in your presentations. It's absolutely necessary that we have some of these qualities of demonstrating what exactly we are trying to make the other person understand. And therefore, very important for communication. Very important as communication.
Joy, would you like to add to this about culture specific, sign language, culture specific body language? Because we have a lot of culture specific behavior which it can be misinterpreted in another culture. You know very well that there are some things which we do, for example folding hands and greeting someone, which is typically Indian, we all know. But what about other cultures? What forms of greeting do other cultures have, and how do they convey what they want to?
Yeah, one common.
Can we just take a phone call and then continue this? Yes, we have a telephone call.
Hello.
Yes.
Madam, నేను పూనా నుంచి తులసి భారతభూషణ్.
Yes. Tell me.
I'm working as a textbook officer
Yes.
for Maharashtra State Textbook Bureau. I would like to know whether this topic
Yes.
can be put for first to 8th standard children. Any part of this that body language or silent language.
We have put it into our postgraduate program in English, which means it can be, you are asking whether it can be put into the school textbook
For
setting.
children also.
For children, certainly. I think as Professor Rajagopal said a short while ago, we teach our children right from childhood. In fact, we teach them how to behave, and in fact, if they learn early, they will probably make it more a part of themselves than if they learn at a later stage. Maybe you will add to what I'm saying.
In fact, it's a very fine question. First of all, I'm so glad that you have thought of it at the school level, which is amazing, ma'am. Don't you think we should include that in our syllabus?
Yes, sir. That is why I'm asking. So far, even when we've learnt literature and all in MA level, also we never had this body language and silent language separately.
Yes.
So it's very fortunate nowadays. Students are getting it.
Yeah. I
so
think
because it's a big thing, can I get in touch with you through email, sir?
Yes, certainly. We'll let you know. You can write to me at the university and you can also mail to me. My email ID is pushpa.ramakrishna@gmail.com. You can send me a mail. I'm sorry I cannot have it on the screen for you, but it's quite
It's
simple.
all right, yeah.
pushpa.ramakrishna@gmail.com. You
Yes,
can
ma'am.
send a mail to me and you
Yes,
can
ma'am.
send me your questions. I'll certainly reply. I'll send you
Yes,
my
I
response.
would love to include it in my textbook.
Yeah, sure.
I've prepared textbooks especially for Telugu children of Maharashtra state.
That would be very good. I think you should actually include it because they will start learning early enough and then it will
see,
be a
the
part
whole
of.
point is that there are lots of examples. Whether you take sculpture, whether you take painting, you take pictures from temples, you take pictures of dancers, you take pictures of actors doing many things. Now, even if you were to take those still pictures, they tell you quite a lot, and you can convert many of those into your own role plays in the classroom, and you can yourself learn such a lot from, a lot of meaning from them, that you can interpret it. First learn to interpret and then add on to your
I'm glad you
syllabus.
mentioned role plays because that's what many, I think Joy also must be using role play as a methodology in her classes. And perhaps we need to think of drama and what actually takes place in a play in theatre is when you're trying to enact what the author or the playwright has said,
Yes.
and you try to project that particular character or image. You're really putting on the role of taking on the role of the character, and you need to change your body language accordingly. So I think it's very important that we include it in early learning, so that children begin to develop these qualities of theirs. I'm really glad that you have been with us. We have discussed, as you know, part of those students who are watching us, though the students of our MA program who are watching us would probably have found that we have not only discussed what actually is there in the material, but have supplemented it to quite an extent, because we have tried to bring examples. Professor Rajagopal, Dr. Joy Anuradha have brought in a lot of examples to illustrate what we mean by body language and silent language. I'm sure that you would have liked to have a lot of gestures and so on. Sitting down, we are probably not able to show you the postures and the things we could have done, dramatized for you by standing up, or in the class it's possible to do that. I'm sure you will try it out yourselves to see how one can actually indicate or show through behavior the state of the mind, show through actions the state of the mind, and show how we can convey a lot through that. Communication happens through the body as well, and not simply through language which is uttered. And in fact, very often, as the example Joy gave us, very often if we are trying to create a paradox or create some kind of a contrast between, you gave the example of the sound of music. You said that you want to show that that's the art of the writer or the filmmaker who has tried to bring out the fact that she is not confident, but singing of confidence. So everything, right from the moment the candidate comes for an interview, the moment the candidate enters into the room where the interview is taking place, if you watch the way in which the candidate enters, the spring in his step and so on will indicate how he or she is feeling.
Actually, you should alert all your students that it's not just reading the lessons alone, but taking messages from the lessons.
Yes.
There is a lot to learn outside the classroom. That when you talk
which is what you have tried to do, both of you here, I think have tried to do that.
They must make it an attempt to watch many of these things, observe them, record them, and see how they can be interpreted in relation to what you have mentioned in the lessons. And that's a good way of learning the content of the lesson itself.
And of assimilating what has been given in the material. It's not simply a question of learning the definitions, say, of kinesics or of proxemics and so on. It's also to relate to the actual context of life around them, and to see where exactly, why it's called kinesics or why it's called proxemics. And I'm sure they will look out for it now, because the examples you have given. Thank you very much, Professor Rajagopal, for being with us in the studio today and for interacting with our students. Thank you, Joy, for being here today and for participating in this program today. Thank you.